the Vampire Counts haven't had a DLC in almost 10 years, which means their roster has barely seen a change since I was in high school. Well, thanks to the From the Grave mod, it's finally changing, with 13 brand new units to pull others into the ground with you. Recruiting these units in the campaign is as simple as building the 2 new recruitment buildings, or making use of their lords when creating a new army. The lords have fairly standard skill trees with the odd unique skill here and there, but nothing to write home about as far as I could tell. Speaking of the lords, we've got 2 of them. First up, the Pale Monarchs. These are very powerful lords, both for casting and general battling. Their melee stats are very strong, especially their attack. This, combined with their decent weapon strength, makes them excellent at helping out their front lines troops against most standard threats. Their lack of mage armor piercing does limit their efficacy somewhat, but they do have magical and wraithblade damage to deal damage over time and drain enemy vigor to replace their own barrier. They're also nice and tanky, so can stay in combat for quite a while without needing to worry. Just keep an eye out for missiles, as the lack of shield can spell a quick doom. Speaking of spells, they have a great mix for the laws of vampires, death and beasts, granting them plenty of damage and utility. Get them into melee combat and casting to get tons of value, no problem. The Flesh Reapers drop some armor from the Monarchs, but in doing so gain flight, tons of speed and even more attack. They'll still perform about the same in melee, so use their flight to get them on the optimal targets, and again, be sure to avoid ranged as flyers are super easy to focus down if you aren't evasive. Their spells are a mix of the laws of vampires and death, so you are looking at lots of utility and a little damage here and there. I really don't have a lot to say since they really are very similar to the Monarchs, but with some different spells and wings. Still, great lords, so it just depends what spells you want. But if you instead want to take your Warhammer based gaming on the go, then you should check out Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. Tacticus brings together over 120 iconic Warhammer 40,000 characters across 21 playable factions to take part in fast-paced tactical combat. There's PvE and PvP options, so whether you want to progress through the campaign or take part in strategic multiplayer to either unite with other players or take them down in combat, there is something for everyone. And if you're worried about things becoming stale, the game receives regular updates with fresh content, new features, game modes, and more. Just recently, with Warhammer Skulls, Tacticus announced that they are celebrating Dawn of War 4. This added the new Last Stand event on the 24th of May, allowing you to command Captain Cyrus of the Blood Ravens chapter to hold out for as long as you can against endless swarms of enemies. Alternatively, if you're feeling low-key evil, on the 28th of May, you can take control of the Necrons in their conflict against the Dark Angels, facing off against Primarch Lion L. Johnson in an epic final showdown. This is only a couple of upcoming events, but there is so much more to do in-game, from the PvE campaign and Onslaught, the PvP arena, and cooperative guilds. There really is something for every kind of player. So if this all sounds like something you'd like to check out, then hit that link in the description or scan this here QR code and use code TACTISKULLS26 when you get in-game to get some goodies. A massive thank you to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for sponsoring the video and supporting the channel. Now, onto the heroes. The Graveseers are pretty standard pure spellcasters with a big focus on summons. They can use a number of summon spells to overwhelm enemy armies with extra units out of nowhere. Outside of this, they also have access to the Lore of the Vampires, so lots of healing and utility to go with their almost free units. Outside of this, they want to avoid combat at all costs with their low melee stats, damage and armor. There's never really a point in sending them in unless you're against zombies or something else totally harmless, and even then, they're unlikely to rack up a lot of value. And lastly, the Lich Disciples. These are quite similar with the same access to the Lore of the Vampires with plenty of summons, but are a lot better in combat. They gain some massive boost to both melee stats, along with over double the armor and a huge increase to their weapon strength. They're still not the most armor piercing, so against extremely tough targets they may struggle, but against the right enemies, they will do great with that combination of magical and wraithblade. They can be used just like the lords, so throw down in melee and get some casting done, so they get plenty of value no matter where you send them. Moving over to the melee infantry, first up we have Grave Marchers. These are pretty much upgraded zombies coming with 25 armor and some very minor improvements to their melee stats. They're still a meat shield, only now they'll take slightly longer to go down, so are better at absorbing whatever punishment you throw at them. They still can't kill anything by themselves, so will need lots of help sending their way if you want whatever they're fighting to die. Still, if you ever thought zombies were a little bit too easy to kill, these are the solution. Barrow Guards are pretty similar to Grave Guard with a little less armor and 20 less entities, but more attack and charge bonus. This results in a unit that is marginally worse at holding the line for extended periods of time, and marginally better at dealing damage whilst they do. I'd still suggest sending them as much help as you can if they're battling anything real, since their damage is still fairly low, especially in the armor piercing department. Still, they're a great alternative to Graveguard, and it helps they look pretty badass too. Bone Hewers drop the shields from the Barrow Guards along with little defense and armor, but gain a huge boost to attack and speed. However, their greatest power is their Frenzy and Hunger, which provide further boosts to their offense and allow them to heal in melee. This makes them into a chaff shredding machine that can obliterate tides of less armored enemies in no time flat. Against high armor, they're not quite as strong and will need some help, but for everything else, they will walk straight over them. And if you really want to min-max, you can use their improved speed and charge bonus to make the most of that devastating flanker to deal huge damage to enemies' backs. It'll be a bit of a challenge, but it's there if you want it. Grim Bulwarks are the most similar to the Halberd Graveguard, dropping a little health and speed along with most of their armor-piercing damage to gain improved armor, defense, and shields. They are the ultimate line holder for the vampire counts, being very difficult to move or pick apart from range with their silver shields. On the damage side of things, they are a bit weak, especially against armor, so will need lots of help if you want to take down anything tough. But if you're looking for the best way to hold enemies still and give the rest of your army time to work, these are the units for you. The Behemoth, whilst technically an infantry unit, is an absolute monster from the single entity to the damage. This is a giant dude with a giant axe with moderately giant attack, giant enough non-armor piercing damage, and a giant thirst for fresh blood. Not only does he cleave through infantry in no time with that bonus, he also inflicts the disemboweled status, which deals extra damage over time. Plus, he has the Hunger, so heals whilst in melee. Plus, he has Berserk, so gains increased stats the longer he's in melee at the cost of a little bit of Rampage here and there. Plus, he has Executioner, so will wipe out low HP entities in seconds. Essentially, he's a real force to be reckoned with in melee and a great choice for a small entity monster to beef up beyond damage. Not the most armor piercing, but can put in good work regardless. The Dread Marshals are the new endgame damage dealing infantry from the vampire counts. They have stat improvements across the board from Greatsword's Graveyard, but, and quite like Kugath, it's a pretty big but, they drop 1/3 of their entities and HP. This means they deal a lot of damage but do not have the HP to maintain that damage for a long period of time. For example, they are statistically superior to Greatswords, but end up in a bit of a stalemate without intervention from their lord. If they can charge up their Blood Greed on some weak units before, then maybe they can clap over damage dealers, but right out the gate, even with the Hunger, they tend to take a lot of hits and cannot sustain through it. Still a very strong frontlines unit that needs help just so they won't die, but does excellent damage all by itself. We also have a unit of ranged infantry, the Hollow Marks. Let's get the obvious out of the way first, pretty much the only sustainable ranged infantry on the roster, and totally worthless in melee, so let's focus on the missiles. They come with medium range and plenty of ammo, along with a very strong damage for a curved firing arc. This is a good bit of armor piercing, almost as much as handgunners, and they can deal it from safety on other infantry, no problem. This makes them excellent damage dealers, adept at taking out anything from infantry to giant single entities, no issue. Their one downside is the slightly lower range, but still plenty to work with from the back lines, so I'm really nitpicking. Our new cavalry unit is the Morn Grave Knight. These are slightly weaker Blood Knight Lancers with less defense, damage and armor, but more HP and entities, so they still hit very damn hard. Their armor piercing damage is still quite low, so against tougher targets they'll have to make quite a few charges to get value, but still with 72 charge bonus, they hit like a truck no matter what they land on. And charging is exactly how you want to be using them, as their lower melee stats are not conducive to sustained melee. With their higher speed, this will be no problem. As long as you can keep up with their micro, they're pretty great. And lastly, the new monster, the Mire-born Horror. This is very much like the Brood Horror from the Skaven, with the same general appearance and speed, but with some major stat buffs. More armor and melee stats make them into very powerful melee monsters. Their blistering speed allows them to attack pretty much anything they like, and their melee stats and armor piercing poison damage means they can easily take down most threats no problem. The only danger is their larger size, making them easy targets for missiles, so either take out the threat directly or use their speed to avoid it. Otherwise, they're great for attacking backlines, frontlines, and any other lines you fancy. This is a fairly simple mod, adding a handful of units to the vampire counts, but I think the quality of these units and how well they complement the existing roster makes them well worth checking out. It's mostly focused on melee infantry, but every new addition has a place on the roster without making other units feel obsolete. They strike a great balance between fulfilling key niches whilst maintaining the feel and playstyle of the vampires. I'm especially a fan of the new monsters as they fill gaps the vanilla roster has without feeling too strong. The Behemoth is a great early game monster that does a great job of beefing up your front lines without stepping on the toes of Crypt Horrors or the Vargulf. Similar to the Horrors, with its high speed it brings new flanking options to the vampire counts, which will never be a bad thing. The new Lords and Heroes are also quite nice and strong, but I do wish there was a little bit more variety. All of them feel quite similar, ranging from pure spellcasters to spellcasters that are decent in melee but nothing crazy. It would have been nice to have one that focused a lot more on combat, as they do feel a little one note. The vampire counts are also a faction with arguably too much choice when it comes to their lords, thanks to the bloodlines mechanic, so finding a spot for these as army leaders when they are so standard in campaign and battle gets to be pretty tough. All in all though, for a simple mod focused on adding some new units to the roster complete with their own recruitment building to keep things balanced, it's a great mod that I highly recommend to any undead enjoyer. The units all look and play the part, so never feel out of place or difficult to justify, no matter what stage you're at in your campaign. But if you want to know if the latest DLC campaign is worth picking up, then check out this podcast where myself, along with Nerd Rage Fred and Monsters Abound, talk about just that.